everybody, Peggy here. Welcome back to the channel. I am here today to talk about scrap. I am here to talk about 10 reasons. I've come up with 10 what I think are pretty good reasons why you should keep your scrap. I'm going to go through them in what I think is a reasonable order. So we'll get started with that. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions and ideas. If you think of something that I miss, absolutely drop a comment below. Let me know. But I am just going to get started. So, 10 reasons to keep your scrap. Number 10 is the cost. Some fabrics are really expensive. Simple. End of story. If you have gone out and bought, say a quality silk for, $100 a yard. Okay, nobody's going out and, well, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. If you've gone out and bought yourself some really expensive fabric, then obviously your priority is going to be to use it all up. If you have a piece of scrap of that stuff left over, you can't return it. That's not how buying fabric works. So keep it. What if that really expensive project you did with that really expensive fabric ends up needing a small repair? What if you get an idea for a small accent piece to go with whatever that original piece was? Say you've made a skirt and now you have an opportunity to turn some of that fabric into a belt. Well, you don't want to go out and have to buy that fabric all over again. So cost. Some fabrics are really expensive. That's just the end of it right there. Other fabrics, not so much, but it doesn't matter because if you're always having to go out, if you have to go out and buy fabric for every little thing every single time, you're going to find your costs are going to add up, even if it's not necessarily an expensive project. But cost is important. Fabric collecting gets expensive, trust me. Okay, that's number 10. Number 9. One of the main uses that you can use fabric for is stuffing. Now, you may not want to stuff a teddy bear or a pillow or something with that kind of fabric, but there's things that you can stuff. This is probably stuffed with sand. It's probably not. This one's probably not sand, but scrap fabric is great when you need a little bit of stuffing for projects where you want a heavier texture or where the texture won't matter. Again, it just saves you from having to go out and buy new stuff. So that's number 9. That's number 9. Number 8, patching and mending. Obviously, if you want to if something needs a patch, why go out and have to go buy a whole new thing if you can put a cute little patch on it and make it look nice? And there's 2 kinds of mending. I didn't grab an example. I'll make an example. I will make an example right now. Give me 2 seconds and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay. So you've got a piece of fabric. You got a piece of fabric, it's got a hole in it. So what if you grab, you can grab a similar color fabric, make a patch. You can also, if something has a hole in it, you can line your fabric up from the back and then darn it shut. That was a really bad example, but I cut some fabric today, so I feel accomplished. We're fine. So patching and mending, especially if what you're patching and mending could actually be improved by a colorful piece of fabric. I need more caffeine today or something, I swear to God. Okay, patching and mending can be a really good thing. There are types of mending where your patch goes behind and your mending goes over the top, where the fabric that you're using for mending isn't very important. So that's also something to think about. So anyway, patching and mending. That's number 8. Number 7 is kind of an extension of number 8. Anywhere where the fabric won't matter or be seen. Because, I got an example. Okay. So I stole a pair of my wife's jeans, and what do we have right here? We have the pocket. Now, if something happens and this pocket gets damaged, I will cut out and replace the pocket. I am going to use fabric from my stash. I am not going to the store and spending however much to get a perfect match on a fabric that nobody's going to see, and as long as it works for the function intended, it's also not going to matter. There are other things that you can do where the fabric isn't going to be seen or noticed. One thing that I do, I think I just did this in a video, I think my last video has some of this in it. If I am making quilt blocks for storage, I personally find that the batting can break apart really easy in the sewing machine. It's super stretchy. It just fluffs everywhere. So if I'm making a quilt block or a large one or a lot of them, I will sometimes use a piece of scrap underneath. So I'll have my quilt, I'll have my I'll have the piece that I intend to quilt. I'll have my batting, but I will have a piece of scrap behind it all. It just adds a single layer of thickness. It doesn't hurt anything, and it can protect your work as you're going, and it's never going to be seen. I would never go out and spend money buying fabric for this. I will always save my scrap, and that's what I will use it for. Because when the project is done, that piece of fabric as a stabilizing fabric will never ever be seen. So that's number 7. Any place where the fabric won't matter or be seen. That's a good reason to keep scrap, especially if you have slightly larger pieces. Number 6, stitch testing. So a lot of machines have fancy stitches. A lot of fancy stitches don't work. The reason why they don't work is because some stitches show up better if you stitch faster instead of slower. Some stitches you have to stitch slower. Some stitches work better on thicker fabrics versus thinner fabrics. And it's just all a matter of, it's fiddly. It's fiddly. So if you have a piece of scrap that you don't care about and you're going, I don't know what fabric, I want a fancy stitch for my next project and don't know what to do, you can test it here. Decide which one you like. Like I'm already looking at this one and that bottom one, and you pay attention to what you did and how you did it. On 2 layers of fabric going full speed, this one's leaving a little puckering. So I might try it again. I might fold it onto 4. Is my project more than 2 layers? I'll try it again. Anyway, you can end up really sucking up a lot of your time stitch testing, but you can stitch test. Now what you can also do is, as well as stitch testing, you can thread test your threads and see if you like the way they look together. If you're doing hand needlework, I want to try this stitch. Oh, I don't like the way that's showing up on this particular fabric. And again, like if you're doing fancy stitches on silk versus suede versus quilting cotton, you're going to get different effects. So again, you don't want to go out and spend money. Oh, I better buy an extra 2 yards of fabric so I can stitch test. Just save your scrap for that. And you don't have to save big giant pieces for stitch testing, as long as it's big enough to test what you're trying to test. That is, I have a list here. I have a list so I don't lose track because I'm a squirrel some days. That's number 6. Number 6 is for stitch testing in any way that you are needing to test your stitches, or thread testing, or color matching, that sort of thing. Number 5, practice. Now this is especially true if you intend to use an expensive fabric for your finished piece. So if you are planning to make a silk skirt, you may want to save some cheap fabric. If you had some cheap sheeting for your last project, you may want to make a test fabric and see if you like the way it's going to. Oh, I like the style and form of it, so I'll go ahead and use the expensive fabric. Now, if you plan on using expensive fabrics, then it's kind of a given. Or if you're just not confident and you want to, I have extra fabric, I'll try one first, see what I think. I'm not confident on zippers. I will put in a couple of test zippers. Don't forget, some things you can put in a zipper and then pick the thread out and reuse the zipper because they are really, 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 really sturdy. So various ways to practice. This is a practice piece. This is practice. I wanted to practice on a particular style. I wanted to practice on the color matching and see what I could get away with in terms of random colors. I wanted to see what this would look like. And now I'm not happy with it. I didn't like the way it turned out. I am out no money. I am out the cost of my thread because I used all scrap for this. That way I can sew with confidence. I'm not risking any. I can sew with confidence because I'm not risking anything, period. If you're not risking anything, then you're more willing to try new things. You're more willing to take a risk, more willing to say, oh, let's see what this does versus let's see what that does. This project was done with leftover batting from another project, leftover fabric. Even this was a larger piece of leftover fabric, so I saved my scrap. So practice. Practice is number 5. And like all things, the more opportunities you have to practice, the better you are at the other things. And especially when practicing comes with a cost, practice with the stuff that's free. Okay. Accent fabrics. Now, I didn't come up with a good example. Of this. So pillow ruffles, bindings, linings. I did come up with this guy because this is the design. This inside can be made of anything, and because I happen to have scrap, because I happen to like the way my scrap looked against the the fabrics I was choosing, I was able to use this. So let's call this the accent fabric is the inside. Any place where you're going to be using fabrics that, any place where you're going to be using fabrics where you don't necessarily need a lot. Like if you're just, like these are what, 7 thin pieces as an accent inside of the picture frame here. That's where you want to look for your scrap. That's where you want, like, unless you have a particular design in mind, that's where you want to consider looking in your scrap bucket first. So accent fabrics, bindings, also linings. Do I have anything with a lining? Again, okay, the lining inside of that pocket, that could be considered a lining. Anything, because it's not going to be seen, it's not going to affect the final appearance of the final piece. So accent fabrics, obviously, number 3, we're getting into the top 3 now. And accent fabrics was number 4. We're getting into number 3 now. Number 3, quilt blocks. Saving, let me get back here. This was made from scrap. This was made from leftover fabrics from other projects. Now, I remind everybody that I sew for a living. I have massive, this is the same pile of scrap in a different design. I have massive piles of scrap in my house. Like, I mean, so I always struggle to find things to do with my scrap. So when you find that you have enough leftover fabric to do something else that will help a different project, then that's the perfect time for it. I'm going to turn these two pieces with some leftover batting that I have and some leftover, and I'm going to take some scrap fabric that I have to use as the backing. I'm going to take some scrap batting that I have. I'm going to mix it with this that I have here as scrap. And then I'm going to make a handle, and these 2 pieces of fabric are going to become a tote bag. They're going to become a tote bag, and that tote bag is probably going to last me for the next 20 years. And my overall cost, 0. Everything was scrap. Unless you want to literally get anal and talk about the cost of your thread. That's all it cost me is some thread and some time. All this is costing me is thread and time to make a really nice tote bag that's going to last for a long time. Okay, so that is quilt blocks. And something else that you can do, which I didn't grab. Oh, I did so. I grabbed the second piece. Now, this is actually in my Etsy shop. And I did not use scrap for this because it was a planned project. But if you were doing one for yourself, I would say that this guy here, now this is a pre-done panel. This is black, this is black, this is black. So where do you get this from? Where do you get that? All I needed there was a 2.5-inch strip of fabric, big enough to go around once. If you're making a project like this for yourself, and you are working with a single accent fabric, if I were to do this, if I were to be doing this and only doing one and one only, the first place I would go looking for fabric is I would try to get the accent fabric out of my scrap bin. And if you are selling stuff, saving your scraps and getting some of your, goes back to cost, saving your scraps and getting some of your fabrics for your projects that you intend to sell, there's nothing wrong with that because it helps you keep your costs down, which means it helps you keep your costs to your customers down. If I had to go out and buy brand new fabric for every single project, every single time, I would have some of my stuff, some things that I sell, I would have to raise my prices significantly. It doesn't mean everything comes from the scrap bin, but it does mean that if I were only doing, I did a series of 6 or 7 of these. If I were only doing one, I would have looked at my scrap bin before I looked any place else for the accent fabric, bring my cost down, bring the buyer cost down. So never be ashamed of what you do with your scraps, because even when you're in business for yourself like I am, keeping your cost down keeps everybody's cost down and makes you a much more I guess competitive, what's the right word? But I like to keep my prices as low as I can, and that helps me do it. And it can help you too. Okay, so that is number 3 with a shout out back to number 10. Okay, number 2 is applique and crumb quilting, or any project that requires a large variety of small pieces. Now, as you get going, okay, let's get back to this guy. Now, if I were to decide to put these in the shop, I would need to be doing lots and lots and lots and lots of these, which means I would need lots and lots and lots and lots of small pieces. Like I said, I'm not happy with this. It's not going in the shop, and this was just for me, but that's irrelevant. If I were, okay, this is the reason I was thinking of this. I am thinking of ways to scale this up to make a tarot, to make a windowed tarot mat. I mean, no secrets here. That's what I'm planning on. That's what I'm hoping to do. I'm using my scrap to practice until I get to what I want. But if I start doing this on a larger scale, I mean, if I start, I'm saying it all wrong, but most of you guys, I hope, know me by now. So now this is a project that is applique. Let me see if I can get a full one up here so you guys can look at it. I should have refolded this better before I got started, but we will not worry about that. Okay. You guys are just going to watch me fool stuff around. This is applique. This is a quilt that was given to me by a friend, and this is applique. Every single piece on here was cut to shape and then stitched in by hand. Some of these pieces are larger, but if you look at that bridle, that's one piece. That's the other piece. The eyes are done in by embroidery, so stitch testing would have helped for that. One piece there. The saddle is, you got your background piece, then you got the red sewn on top of that, then you've got that is a heart. Then you've got your little blue heart sewn onto that. You got the feet, you got your little rocking horse, you got your tail. This is a lot of small parts that were put together to make, now this particular project was done, every single piece, every single one of these matches. But some people like to make these not match. So other types of quilting, crumb quilting, is something that's really popular, where people take their tiniest pieces and put them together into a block. That's really popular. Other people call it postage stamp quilting. Let me just put this away before I make a bigger mess. Okay. Other people do quilting, and they challenge themselves to use as small a blocks as possible. There's also something called peekaboo quilts, where, this would be... You would use pieces like that. There's a little star there. So you would cut that out so that you see the little star and incorporate that into a piece. Okay, so applique is where you are taking small pieces and building a picture. Crumb quilting or small piece quilting is where you're looking for a large variety of small pieces. Sometimes it's also an accent fabric. Sometimes your accent fabric. Let's get back to these guys for a second. I'm just throwing stuff around. Pretty soon I'm just going to be throwing it behind me, but we're almost done. It's fine. Let's assume that I wanted a small shot of a different color in here, and maybe I'll put one accent strip, one small strip in black or a bright purple or whatever color is going to match what I'm working with. If people like to do that, go to your scrap pile. Don't go buying fabric for this stuff. And again, a lot of this shouts back out to number 10. Some people are very particular and just don't want to deal with their scrap, and that's entirely your right and your choice. It is your stuff. So, but the applique and crumb quilting, you could find yourself at the store trying to buy 30 different colors of fabric. And don't forget, when you go to the fabric store to buy things, stores do have minimums. You're not going to walk away with a 1-inch strip. Trust me. The shops that I go to, I think the narrowest I can get is a quarter yard, which is a 9-inch strip. So saving your scrap off of larger projects will give you an opportunity to do more varieties of colors, color patterns, color matchings, and all the things. It'll also make things like applique and whatnot a lot easier. That's number 2. Applique and crumb quilting basically is when you get right down to it. Now, number 1, at least number 1 for me, is small projects. This is a small project. This, I think, is the smallest bag that I've made for me. It's not in the shop. This turns out, what deck do I have in there right now? I have a teeny tiny tarot deck in here. I have the tiny tarot, and I have it in a tiny bag. And I like the way it matches. I don't know that it actually does match, but I like the way they look together. This was left over from another project. It was only a very tiny bit bigger than this. And I was looking for something to make this out of. I didn't want to wreck. Sometimes you'll have a project, and your project requires a 9-inch strip of fabric that goes the entire width of the fabric. If you cut off a little piece for a project like this, you now don't have enough for your bigger project. Which is why keeping fabric on hand for small projects is a really good idea. And again, this is like all relevant. This was a small project. This is kind of a small project. Like, so they all kind of qualify. They all kind of qualify more under more than one heading here. But your small projects are where you're going to get your most practice in, especially if you've practice is, I want to see what this seam looks like. So I'm going to sew these two pieces together. Oh, I like that seam. I like that. There's about 8 different ways to sew a seam. So let's just leave that one there. And you're like, okay, I want to pick which one I like the best. And then but eventually you don't want to practice forever. You're going to want to do small projects of small useful things, because obviously you're going to want to step out of the sandbox and get to making things that you can use. So your small projects, it's great when they come from scrap. Again, builds confidence. You're not spending the same amount of money for your stuff. You might be able to get all of your fabric from your scrap bin. You might be able to get some of it. Sometimes you can get none of it. I mean, I've got plenty of projects that I do that there's no way I'm getting my fabric from the scrap bin. It just depends on how big it is, how big my project is, what I'm trying to accomplish. And that's it. That is number one, your small projects. My personal belief, the reason why I made this number one is because my personal belief, and I will die on that hill, is that your small projects are where you build your skills. If you sit down and go, I want to learn how to make a quilt. Okay, well, have you done one of these yet? Because if you do one of these and learn how to connect them to 6 other ones of those, you've got the basis to starting a quilt. But if you don't start small, it's like if you want to be a race car driver, you don't just hop in the race car and go. And this is kind of how I think of it. Your small projects are where you're going to get your really solid opportunities to build solid skills, and you'll see the results of all the other things, all your practice pieces, all your stitch testing, all your working with fabrics that won't be seen, patching and mending. So yeah, your small projects, keeping the fabric for that. And I mean, obviously, if you reach a point where you've got too much scrap in your world, you have to cull it, you have to break down your collection. But I always prioritize keeping at least some scrap at all times. And look what I've got back there. I can be a lazy bum and just not save my scrap, and I still save it anyway. I still save it anyway because I don't want to sit down for a day of messing around with a bunch of different projects or doing whatever and then go, oh, I just spent this much money on the fabric and I don't know how to express it. I can end up making it sound super shitty. I don't want to turn you guys off on sewing. I want to do the exact opposite. So save your scrap, practice when you need to, practice with your scrap, and practice. I'll practice on, this is going to go in the garbage when I'm done with it. I will use this to stitch test if I have a different test. Once I reach the end, I'm not going to agonize. I'm not going to cry about throwing it away. I'm not going to go, oh, that cost some money. I could have saved money if I'd used it for something else. I was like, I'm not doing that. It's leftover fabric. It's scrap. And now I don't have to feel bad about it going in the garbage when I'm done with it. Anyway, that's it. That is my 10 reasons. So cost, number 10, stuffing, number 9. Stuffing is weird. Let's just readdress that one for a minute. If you're not working on the kind of projects that require stuffing, then don't save it for just stuffing. But if you're hoping to do that sort of stuff, having a bag that you just go, yeah, stuff that in there, that can help. Okay, so cost, stuffing, patching and mending, any place where the fabric won't be seen, stitch testing, practice, accent fabrics, quilt blocks, applique and crumb quilting. Crumb quilting, like I said, being slightly different from quilt block, is a lot more random. I am going to do a crumb quilting project coming up, so you'll see the difference. And your small projects. That's not a quilt block. A quilt block is something you're doing so that you can build it into a bigger project later. I'm talking about pencil cases, pot holders, coasters, tablecloths. Tablecloths can be a small project depending on what you're doing to put them together. Table mats, a floor mat for your dog's dish. Small projects. That's number 1, and that is it. That is my top 10 list. If you have anything else that you think is important or worth noting, or just that you'd like to share, it doesn't have to look important or feel important to be important. I said that right. I know I said that right. Anyway, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the things so that you can catch the next video and be notified of it. And don't forget to upvote. Give me some love. Those upvotes are the best way to help the channel. And I'd love to hear from you, and I will see you later. Bye.